Hello, welcome to the fifth module of the course Audit and Assurance. And today we'll be discussing on audit evidence and documentation. Audit evidence and documentation. And in the process, we will look into having an understanding to the nature and characteristics of audit evidence. Also, we will apply appropriate audit procedure to obtain sufficient and um, appropriate evidence, and this module will also apply basic audit sampling concepts, and also there will be a preparation of clear, complete, and well organized audit documentation. This presentation is just um, an overview of the whole thing. We have the whole lecture in notes, so you can go through. What is audit evidence? It's actually all information which are used by the auditor to reach conclusion on which the audit opinion is being formed, is based. So these are evidence, these are informations that are gathered by the auditor to be able to reach a conclusion. And this conclusion is what the auditor will use to form audit opinion. And we have two main sources of audit evidence. The first is the accounting records, including the general ledger, invoice, contract, journal, reconciliations, and we have other informations as the second source, which contains confirmations, minutes, industry reports, auditors' calculation, inquiries, and the likes. And we also have two key qualities of audit evidence. The first is sufficiency, and this is the quantity of evidence, and we have another as appropriateness, and this talks about the quality of evidence, which is the relevance and reliability. And from this, we can see that it is not only the quality we talk about, we also talk about the quantity. And these two are very, very important. And the rule is that more evidence cannot compensate for poor quality evidence. So if there is poor quality evidence, then being able to gather more evidence does not compensate for it. Both work hand in hand. We have hierarchy of evidence reliability, and when we say this, evidence is more reliable when it has the following as we'll be discussing. The first one is from independent external auditor. So it is more reliable when it is from an independent external auditor, separate from the internal auditor, separate from the organization that is being audited. Another is it is reliable when it is generated internally under effective control. It is reliable when it is generated internally under effective control. It is also reliable when it is obtained directly by the auditor and provided by the client. And also it is reliable when it is in original documentary form. And for this, when we talk about being in original form, we mean copies or oral statements being made. And it is also reliable when it is corroborated by multiple sources. And an example of this is a bank statement, which is external. It's more reliable than a management estimate, which is internal. And this talks about the reliability of the evidence that is supposed to be used by the auditor. We have 7 key audit procedures for gathering evidences. We have inspection, observation, external confirmation, recalculation, reperformance, analytical procedure, and inquiry. And when we talk about inspection, it is examining records or assets. And an example of this is reviewing invoice, physical, lead counting, inventories, and the likes. And when we talk about observation is watching a process being performed. And for this, an example is observing the year-end inventory count. Another is the external confirmation, which deals with direct written response from a third party. An example of this is sending receivables confirmation to customers. Another key audit procedure in gathering evidence is recapitulation, and this deals with checking mathematical accuracy. Example of this is recomputing depreciation expense. We have the reperformance, which deals with independently executing a control or procedure. And for this, an example is performing a bank reconciliation. We have the sixth one, which is analytical procedures, and this deals with evaluating financial relationships. And example of this is comparing current revenue to prior year. And lastly, which is inquiry, is seeking information from knowledgeable persons. An example of this is interviewing management about unusual transactions. And procedures are often used in combination, so it may not be isolated. It can be used. It can be combined together to be able to gather the necessary evidences that are required by the auditor. There are specific techniques used, and that is vouching and tracing. When we talk about vouching, it's the purpose is to test the existence or occurrence, to test the existence or occurrence, and to know if it is actually real. And how do we do this? You select item from accounting record, like sales journal, and inspect supporting source documents like sales invoice, shipping document, and the likes. And for the tracing, which is from source to record. The first is from record to source, and for tracing is from source to record. The purpose is to test the completeness, that is everything recorded, and the how is to select the source document, which is like goods received notes, and trace it forward to accounting records like inventory system, payable entries, and the likes. And the direction of testing determines which assertion is being tested. So if it is from source to record, it is tracing, and if it is from record to source, it is vouching. Looking at audit sampling, what is audit sampling? Audit sampling is applying audit procedures to less than 100% of items in a population. It is applying audit procedure to less than 100% of items in a population. And why do we need to sample? We need to sample for efficiency and practicality. There are sampling risks that are that the sample conclusion differs from the conclusion if the whole population was tested. Yeah, there is risk of that if maybe we have to test the whole population, and also we have to take a sample of them. There may be risk that the conclusion that will be derived from both will be different, and this is actually a risk. And key decision in sampling include: one, definition of the population and sampling unit. Two is determination of sample size. Three is selection of the sample, whether random, systematic, haphazard. And lastly, to perform procedures and evaluate results. And these are the key decisions in sampling. And the types of sampling can be statistical or non-statistical. When we talk about statistical, they are quantifiable risk, while for non-statistical, they are auditor's judgment. We also have audit documentation, which is also known as working paper. And the purpose of this is to, one, record for recording of procedures performed, evidence of obtained, and conclusion reached. And two, to support the audit opinion. Three, to facilitate review, supervision, and inspection. And lastly, to provide a legal defense. And the experienced auditor test for documentations must be sufficient for an experienced auditor with no prior involvement to understand the work done. We have key documentation requirements and structures. What are required as per the content? The first one is audit strategy and plan. Second, we audit assessments. The nature, timing, and extent of procedures performed is very important. The result of procedure and evidence gathered is another one. The significant findings, judgment, and conclusion. And lastly, the communication with management and governance. These are very required contents in documentation. And we have the typical audit file structure, which deals with which includes the administrative, risk assessment, internal control documentation, um, substantive procedure, completion, and reporting. These are the typical audit file structures that are noted. And then for working paper best practice, every working paper should include the following: client's name and period, description or context title, preparer's name, date, and receiver's name and date. And there is need for clear cross-reference to related schedule, audit objective, procedure performed, sample selected if applicable, result of findings and conclusion. These are very important in a working paper as such. And we have principles that guides this. One is clarity and organization, which talks about the logical flow and net presentation. And another principle is complete audit trail, and this deals with link from procedure to evidence to conclusion. And lastly, we have the timely review and clearance as a principle, and this deals with all review notes must be resolved. In conclusion, audit evidence must be sufficient, enough, that is enough and appropriate, relevant, and reliable. And the choice of audit procedure depends on the assertion being tested and desired evidence quality. Also, being able to note that sampling is a tool for efficiency but introduces sampling risk, and documentation is not optional. It is the record of the audit and must be clear, complete, and organized. The working paper is the audit foundation, and it tells the story of the audit and the supports the opinion. On a final note, a well-documented audit is defensible audit. It's a defensible audit. Thank you.